Okay, first question comes from Necron99. He says, do you ever swim in your pond? No. Next question comes from John and Andrusky. What is a good rooted background tank low light plant? Thanks. A good rooted background tank low light plant would be plants like Ludwigia, jungle val. Plants like that really don't require a lot of light and can grow quite rapidly and totally block out the background of your tank. So in other words, they make great background plants and they're easy to grow. Fat Ranchus asks, hey Jacob, my question is, would you ever consider making a video explaining how you made your pond for your plants? Would love to know the details. I actually, when I was building Super Pond, I tried to make a video of the whole process, but because when I was building that pond, I kind of was like experimenting as I was building it. I really didn't have like, I had an idea of what I wanted to build, but things didn't work out along the way. So I really didn't plan things too well. So to film all that would have been, it was proving to be very, very crazy and stressful. And not to mention, we did that build in like 3 days. And when I say we, I mean me and my dad. Thank you, Dad, for helping me. I love you. We did that build in 3 days, and there was like no time to grab a camera, set things up, film things, explain things. It was just go, go, go. So I really wanted to film the whole process, but it just did not happen. But if I do make a new pond, which I probably will in the future, because every year my business gets bigger and bigger, and I don't see business slowing down anytime soon, I probably will need room for more plants, so I will need to build a bigger pond. This pond that I've built is the biggest. It's like 20 feet long, holds over 1,000 gallons, but even still, that might not be enough room in the very near future. So when I do build a new pond, I will definitely film that build, as hard as it may be to do so, and give you guys all the details of how I build these ponds, because I built quite a few of them now. So it would be nice to show that process. And I agree, Fat Ranch Shoes, that would be a nice video. Next question comes from Captain Nemo 49. He says, almost gave up on you, left questions in all your media areas without response. Better start hiring some help, exclamation point, exclamation point. Looking to buy floating plants, frogbit, pearlweed, and dwarf lettuce. Also weeping moss and flame moss. Glad to see you're getting back into the rhythm. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't make a video in maybe like 3 weeks. Still here, still Jacob's Aquarium. As far as frogbit, pearlweed, dwarf lettuce, weeping moss, and flame moss, I only sell pearlweed. Those other plants I don't sell. I would love to sell weeping moss and flame moss, but they are incredibly hard to get. Unless you buy them as a tissue culture, then they're pretty readily available. But I don't sell tissue cultures because they're not really that popular with my customers. My customers prefer big, luscious, beautiful plants, not little tiny plants that come in a cup and pretty much, you know, from what I've experienced at least, don't really make it to you alive. You know, once you usually get tissue culture plants, they're just a cup of, you know, mushy plant matter and that gel stuff in there. That's what's happened to me a lot of the times, and I've heard that from several customers as well. So they're not too popular with my customers, and I don't think they're too popular in general, because you don't really get too much of the plant when you buy it, and they're like incredibly expensive. But yeah, I don't sell any of the plants you mentioned except for pearlweed, so I'm not sure if you're asking if I have those plants or whatever, but nonetheless, I only sell pearlweed. And I'm glad to be back in the rhythm as well. Jose Montivo says, hello Jacob, I've been reading on certain plants. I'm interested in the Echinodorus purple night plant. Haven't heard of that one. I see about 3 or 4 names given to this plant. How big, tall those plants grow? Do you sell it? Any information is appreciated on this plant. I enjoy watching your videos. Thank you for sharing. I don't sell purple night echinodoris. For those of you that don't know, echinodoris is the scientific name for most sword plants. Sounds like a really cool plant, but I don't sell it. I will do my research and try to see if I can get some though. I'm not even sure if this is a new plant, an existing plant that's been on the market. I have no idea. But no, I don't sell it. As far as how big it grows, I really can't say, but in general, sword plants do get fairly large. A lot of the times when people buy Amazon swords from my website, they think that they're going to stay like, 5, 6 inches tall, like, the size when they receive them in the mail. So they plant them in these little 10-gallon tanks, but come to find out in, 6 months, 8 months, a year, they've totally taken over that tank. So, for those of you that don't know, keep in mind that sword plants do get rather large. And I say most because there are some out there that don't really get that big, like chain sword. I'm not sure if that's part of the Echinodoris family, but it might be. But for the most part, a lot of sword plants get really big, so keep that in mind. But no, thank you, Jose, for watching. But I'm sorry I can't be of more help to you with that plant. Next question comes from Bernard Babasa. She says, Jungle Val has black circles all over 2 leaves. Rest seems good and healthy. I tried rubbing the leaves to see if it is algae, but it is not. Please advise. Thank you. Rest seems good and healthy. Black circles on Jungle Val. Never really heard of that. I have no idea. I've never seen black circles on a Jungle Val plant. I have seen like spots, like brown spots, red spots on a Jungle Val plant. But those have proven to be just, part of the plant, the plant's natural color, which I should actually talk about. A lot of the times people receive plants like Java fern, for example, from me, and they see all these little black dots on the plant and they freak out. They're like, oh my God, the plant's dying because it has all these black spots. And, typically when an aquatic plant is going to die, it's usually like it gets black and mushy and starts to die. But people confuse the natural coloration, natural things that happen to plants as a health issue, but it's really not. So I would double check on your Jungle Val. If you've confirmed it's not algae and the plant is still alive, I would assume that that's just part of the plant. As I said, with Java fern, most Java fern has little black dots on it, and that's actually where new plants come out of. Java fern is a weird plant. New plants will grow out of the leaves on Java ferns sometimes, and as well as the rhizome. It's a very strange plant. I like to call it the alien of aquatic plants because it has plants sprouting out from all different places on it. But yeah, just, if it's not algae, I would say it's part of the plant, and I would say it's probably nothing to worry about. But of course, double check. And of course, if your plant is dying, well, they could be a health issue as well. But if it's still alive, I wouldn't worry about it. James Glenn says, I love Limnophilia hipporhoides and Schirnericea rees. Oh my God, these names though, jeez. But I really don't want to do CO2. Would it grow, or am I wasting my money? I plan to use 88 aqua soil, good lighting, and liquid for dosing schedule that includes traces and iron. I guess you're trying to say trace elements. James, I have never grown those 2 plants, but they sound pretty demanding just based on the name. I have grown Limnophilia aromatica before, but I have not grown Hipporhoides. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I would say if you're going to give it ADA soil and liquid fertilizers and good lighting, I would say you have a pretty good chance of those plants growing in your system if they are very demanding plants. If they're, if that's not enough, then I would say CO2 is definitely required for these two plants. I can't say for sure because I never grown them. But what I will say is that maybe you shouldn't, go all gung-ho with these plants in the beginning, and maybe just buy, one bundle of each to test it to see if it will grow in the type of environment that you're creating. And if it does grow, then great, and if it doesn't, then you need to step up your game and use CO2. Chinu Nat says, hi there, I'm making a pond too. Any recommendations regarding C-Chem equilibrium and other fertilizers? In your experience, what would you have done differently? What would I have done differently for making a pond? And any recommendations on C-Chem equilibrium? I guess what I would have done differently with making my pond is maybe design it just a little bit better. Used more wood for the walls of the pond. There's a lot of different ways that a pond like what I built can be built. So definitely when I build the new pond, I will probably change the design and plan a little bit better. But there's lots of things that I can change about the pond. As far as recommendations about C-Chem equilibrium and other fertilizers, C-Chem equilibrium is a product that makes reverse osmosis suitable for an aquarium. It adds a bunch of minerals and stuff back into the water. I can't help you with when you said other fertilizers. I don't even know what that means. Just don't dose a lot in the beginning. I guess I'll give you a really generic fertilizer tip. Robert _AM03 says, hey Jacob, glad to see you back. When did you get started in the aquarium hobby? Oh boy, that is a very long story, but I've already talked about that. I'm not going to talk about that in this video because this video would be like 3 hours long. But if you'd like to read my story about how I got started in everything that I do, you can go to my website, jacobsaquarium.com, and click on the About Jacob tab. Good in the Hood Guppies says, cool, plants and substrate and guppies will be good. Number one to talk about where they came from A to Z, about what to do, how to do in pumps and plants, what tanks, mates, food, carrying breeds, and photos. We're just going to go ahead and skip that one. Next question comes from a band new fish. Hello, Jacob. Do you suggest me using Ver compost in my low-tech tank, or will I suffer an algae bloom, or is it better to use root tabs in low-tech conditions? I assume compost. Ver compost is a type of soil, I would assume. Using soil, dirt, anything of that nature is very risky in a planted tank because an aquarium is a closed system, so an aquarium relies on you doing water changes to keep out the bad stuff, and it's not like a river or a lake where it's a large system and any type of dirt or in there can be spread over a vast area and most likely pose no harm to the inhabitants of that environment. And being that there's just so many different things in dirt, so many different problems that can arise from using dirt and compost and soil and all that stuff, I would stay away from that, and I would use substrate that's specifically formulated for use in planted aquariums. There's a reason why there's substrates are sold on the market for planted tanks specifically, and it's because people don't have good success just grabbing some dirt from their backyard and throwing it in a tank. Dirt is very difficult to make work, and not to mention there's lots of there could be mold spores, yeast, and pests, and all kinds of stuff in there that can wreak havoc in a planted tank. So I would stay away from anything like that and use substrate that's specifically formulated for use underwater in a planted tank. Adin Haran says, what are some cheap ways to enhance your planted tank? Buy cheap plants. Marcio Ramirez Jr. says, how can we do a mini greenhouse for aquatic plants? What are the important things to know? build yourself a greenhouse and cover it with greenhouse plastic and stick a pond in there, and you can grow plants yourself. um, I really can't say what are the most important things to know. I mean, it's a greenhouse. It's pretty straightforward. So Wade Benhouse says, how did you get on with your alterations with fertilizers from your recent video? Also, any advice on how to keep your plants growing so well? I understand your nice sunshine helps quite a bit. Just trying to get my plants to show their best colors while growing healthy. Many thanks. Oh my God, this is a very long question. I assume you're talking about the fertilizers I got from the hydroponic store. Those worked okay, but the thing is that they're just expensive and they don't last that long. And being that my system is so large, it's very difficult to make a small amount of fertilizer go a long way, or even a large amount of fertilizer go a long way. So it's just too expensive. And the plants seem to grow fine without fertilizers in the pond as well. I assume it's because there's plenty of waste being produced by the fish that I have in the pond. So I'm really not too concerned about fertilizers anymore. But I will say that when I did use them, they worked pretty good, and the fish were not affected at all. They're still alive. So I would say if you're thinking about using them, try them out, but don't take my word for it, and try that at your own risk. JCSEIJI, he says, when did you first get interested in aquatic plants? Ever discovered aquatic plants in their habitat? Was it the plants or the habitat that got you hooked? This goes back to the other question. If you want to know more about how I got started in this, you can go to my website and click on the About Jacob tab. But I will answer the last part of that question. And pretty much what got me hooked on plants is just, I love growing things. I love, planting seeds. That sounds funny. I love planting seeds and, cuttings and aquatic plants. And, I especially like planting them in a small form and watching them just blossom into big, beautiful, gorgeous plants, which has always made me confused why people in the aquatic plant or customers of the aquatic plant industry are so obsessed with buying gigantic plants and putting them in their aquariums, because it's like, isn't the whole point of this hobby to watch a plant grow in your tank, your planted tank, not buy an established gigantic plant and just, stick it in your tank and, that's it? I'm continuously confused by that. Maybe it's just me, but I kind of also think that people that are new to this hobby and only want big plants are pretty much still coming from that fake plant environment where they would go to the pet store and buy these big plants, stick them in their tank, and they just look that way forever, and they think they can do the same thing with real plants. So maybe that's why, but can't really say for sure. But I just love plants. I love all things living. I just love growing things. And when I discovered that you can grow things in a glass box anywhere in your home, I absolutely went crazy. Don Gallagher says, my red tiger lotus was red when I got it, but now it's a tan brown color. Could it be a lack of iron? It's in a 55-gallon tank with T8 6500K lining. Wow, people still use T8s? Dang. Well, established aquarium with Osmocote root tabs. I dose water, column, and easy green, no CO2. My red tiger lotus was red when I got it, but now it's a tan brown color. It definitely could be It definitely could be a nutrient deficiency. Usually plants turn different colors, yellow, dark, black and red, or not red, dark brown, because they're lacking some type of nutrients. So I would say that you should think about dosing an all-purpose fertilizer. I know you said you dose Easy Green. But it seems like maybe that's not enough. I don't know. It could also be your lighting as well. T8 lighting is not really the strongest. Tiger lotus plants really aren't that demanding when it comes to lighting, but I have noticed that their colors are much deeper and much stronger when there is lots of light available to them. I know for a fact that when they're grown in my pond and it's been sunny for like a week straight, I can get really, really deep reds and dark greens out of them. So I would say first and foremost, check out your lighting. But if that's not the issue, I would say step up your game when it comes to fertilizer. Maybe dose a little bit more easy green. Because it seems like your red tiger lotus in particular is pretty demanding if it's turning brown. Usually after it turns brown, what comes next is the plant just totally disintegrating. So you want to try to nip that in the butt before anything else starts to happen. Filosofo Takio says, how's your ranchus doing? Long story short, my ranchus disappeared, unfortunately. I think some type of animal ate them, got into the greenhouse somehow. Very sad. Don't really want to talk about it. It was a horrible day for me when I found that out. So let's move on. Mitch M says, howdy Jacob, I hope you're doing good. My question is, I have some crypt wendidity that tends to grow flat and smaller leaves. Is that a sign of too much or not enough light or even duration? They're planted in fluvial stratum with CO2 injections and furs. Please help. Thanks in advance. There's multiple species of crypt wendidity. So it's hard to say if that's just naturally how it grows or something's actually wrong with it. But I will say if a plant is not growing to its full potential, it's lacking some type of, requirement that it needs to reach its full potential. Whether that could be substrate, that could be fertilizers, that could be light, it could be a multitude of things. So I would say, it's a tough one to say, but it seems like you pretty much got everything. CO2 and fluvial stratum and all that stuff, and it sounds like you have enough light. It could just be that's the way the plant grows. It's really hard to say. Keys Corey says, hi Jacob, recently I have been having issues with my tanks, getting a lot of algae in the leaves of the plants that make them look very ugly. How do I work around this? It's impossible for me to tell you how to fix that problem without knowing your maintenance schedule, your plant load, the amount of fish you have in your tank, the type of filtration you use, your lighting schedule. It's really, really difficult to diagnose a problem like that without receiving more information about the environment in question. Arshil Kali says, what do you do when you get your shipment of plants? How do you keep them alive? I put them in my pond and they stay alive. Plain and simple. Rick T. Foster says, oh, I didn't click the read more part on this question, so I might not see it all. This is a gigantic question. Oh my goodness. Hi Jacob, so last year I switched from Seachem fluorite, black sand to Eco Complete. In my 75 gallon, to be honest, I'm not a fan of Eco Complete for a number of reasons. For one, I've noticed a lot more algae growth since I've switched. Significantly black algae, which mainly covers my slow growing plants of useful Adra. I don't have CO2 yet. I run fluvial, planted 3.0 for 6 to 7 hours a day. I change 50% of water once a week. While I did have algae problems before, it was nowhere as bad. Any idea what could be causing the black algae? Wish I could post pics. That was a big question. Again, it's really hard to say why you have algae growing in your tank. But it sounds to me, you said you have Bucephaladra and Anubias. Maybe you don't have enough plants growing in your tank, and maybe they're not established. The number one cause of algae blooms, in my opinion, is not really having a lot of plants in your tank. As you can see, the tank right next to me has a lot of plants. It's almost full. If I didn't have this sand, the tank would be overtaken by this rotala that I have in here. But and as you can see, I have no algae growing in this tank at all. And also, it helps to have a good cleanup crew as well, something that eats algae. There's lots of Amano shrimp and Autocinco's catfish in here that do a great job eating algae. But for the most part, if you don't have a lot of plants growing in your tank and they're not established, you don't have something consuming a lot of excess nutrients. So you're going to have an abundance of excess nutrients, which will definitely, grow algae for the most part. So I would say that might be an issue, but then again, it's hard to say. And yeah, in regards to Eco Complete, I was a fan a while ago, but I really started to despise that substrate because I've never really had good luck with it. The only plants that seem to grow in that substrate are like super easy to grow plants, plants that can pretty much just grow in sand, which puts the question out there: why even buy EcoComplete then? Um, I don't think EcoComplete's a good substrate. And I think that if you're looking for a plant tank substrate, you should look for something else. And sorry, I can't be of more help to you, Rick, but yeah, just keep those things in mind, like I said. Emily Snow, where you been at, Jacob? I've been right here. Tom Patterson, is it possible to put carbonated mineral water in an aquarium for plants? Number 2, root tabs. What causes ammonia spikes? 8 ppm spikes. Carbonated mineral water. It's actually pretty crazy. But as far as I know, from what I've read about Takashi Amano, pretty much the father of this hobby, he actually discovered that CO2 was beneficial to a planet tank by doing just that. He went down to his local store and bought some carbonated water, poured it into his first planet tank, and noticed that his plants began to pearl. And pearling is when a plant produces bubbles just straight from a cut stem or from the leaves themselves. That's pure oxygen. That's the plants consuming CO2 in the environment and producing oxygen. So when he noticed that that was the case, that's when he started to implement CO2 in most of his planet tanks. And that's why we use CO2 till this day. And that's why we owe Takashi Amano a huge thank you. And we should always give him props, because without the things that he's researched and things that he's discovered as he pretty much built this hobby, we would be in a lot of trouble. We wouldn't really know what to do. As far as what causes ammonia spikes, there's a lot of different things that cause ammonia spikes. I'm not one to really answer questions about water parameters though, because I really don't care when it comes to water parameters. I set up planet tanks, I fill them with water, and I do everything right. I do everything by the book, and I hope for the best. I don't ever test my tanks. I don't ever, overload my tanks with fish. So I really have nothing to worry about. Or actually, I do have a lot to worry about because I don't test. Most would probably say. But in my experience, I haven't really had issues with any of my tanks, and I never test. I never worry about ammonia or anything. I just try to do things by the book and follow the rules. If you're not following the rules and you're doing things wrong, well, then there's cause to be concerned. So you should then test your water. But I'm not really one to answer questions about water parameters because I really don't care about them, and I never consider them when I set up a tank. As you can see, I set up this tank. It's been doing fine. The fish that I've had in here from the start are still here. They're still alive. And that's it. Plants are growing great. I followed all the rules, so I really have nothing to worry about. If things ever start to spike in this tank as far as ammonia or whatever, it's because I've changed something drastically or done something wrong. And most of the times those things are pretty identifiable. Is that a word? Identifiable? So it's really something like you pretty much know what you did wrong. It's a lot of the times it's not really mystery. The answer is right in front of you. Casper Aquatic says, good to see you again. Are your plants snail free? Also, what plant would you recommend to use in a small group planter in my aquarium? I have no idea what you're talking about. Are your plants snail free? If you want snail free plants, spend $1 million and buy tissue culture plants. Don't expect snail free plants buying traditional nursery grown plants from aquatic plant vendors like myself. That is the number one frustration I have with customers, is people that expect algae-free, snail-free, pest-free plants when at the end of the day you're buying plants that have been grown outside in a nursery. Not my nursery, but gigantic nurseries in Florida and in different parts of the world. They're not grown in a lab under sterile conditions like tissue cultures are, so they can have anything on them. And I always like to say it doesn't mean I'm any different from anybody else, because people for some reason like to think that because I sell traditional nursery grown plants that I'm the only one that does so, and that's not the case at all. If you buy plants on the internet that aren't tissue cultures, they're traditional nursery grown plants. So you will run the same risk of having snails or algae on them or pests or whatever. Personally, I don't consider snails a risk. I actually welcome snails in my planted tanks because snails eat algae and they clean constantly. That's all they do is roam around and clean, clean, clean all day. So I actually have no problem with snails, and I continuously do not know why people put such a bad name out there for aquatic plant snails, or aquatic snails in general, because they don't eat plants. They don't pose any risk to your fish. In fact, a lot of fish actually like to eat them, so they could be a natural food source for some fish. I just don't know why people have a problem with them. But no, my plants are not snail free. If you want snail free plants, spend 15, 20, sometimes even more than that, dollars on tissue culture plants instead of buying gigantic, big, beautiful plants from my website for like $3. You got to pay the premium if you want laboratory grown plants. Laszlo Lingrero says, hello Jacob, can you do a compare video on your new Kessel light versus the old 360? I like to see how the red plants look. I currently have... Actually, Lazo, I really don't think that's necessary, because I've kind of talked about this before. Even with my Kessel A360, I was getting amazing color out of my plants. You can see that if you check out my previous videos. I have an A360X on this tank, Kessel's newest light, and I still get great red colorations out of my Mania gracilis and even my Rotala in here. So I really can't say that either one produces better color in plants. I'll actually say that both of them equally produce amazing color in plants. And I'm continuously frustrated and confused as to why some people think that Kessel lights are not good at producing color in aquatic plants. I received that comment and that complaint a lot, actually, on my videos about Kessel lights, and I personally have never experienced that. So I don't know what the issue is, but I will say that if you're thinking about buying a Kessel light and you're worried about the amount of color and the type of color that you'll get out of them, or out of your plants, growing your plants underneath Kessel lights, I would say you have nothing to worry about, because they're so high output. They're such like fancy lights that produce like an incredibly bright ray of light. There's really, like, you really don't need anything more than that. So I would say you have nothing to worry about. Deadman Returns, I think, says, I have a question. Are you single? Yes, I am, and I prefer it that way. Carl Heller says, how's the goldfish doing? What's your favorite foreground plant? Guessing baby tears. Last, will you ever get gubby grass or starglass? Loves back. Keep up the good work. Oh, thank you, Carl. The goldfish are no longer with us, as I said. What's my favorite foreground plant? Dwarf baby tears, 100%. You said you're guessing baby tears. Well, you guessed right. Will you ever get guppy grass or stargrass? Nope, unfortunately not. I don't really have demand for those plants, so I really see no point in stocking them or offering them for sale. Elf Flower Star says, I have a question on diseases of plants. Are there any that can affect the fish and humans? If so, how can you protect yourself and your fishes? I really can't say for sure, but I will say, in my experience, and I've been in this hobby for a very long time, since I was like 9 years old, pretty much. I think 9 years old, yeah. I have never, ever, ever, ever experienced anything happening with my fish directly because of something that was on my plants or because my plants in general. I have never experienced that. So, but like I said, I can't say for sure. There's so many variables and so many different things in this hobby. It's really hard to say that that's not something that could ever happen. But I will say, as far as my experience, and I've been in this hobby for a long time, like I said, I personally have never experienced that. Please consider posting videos frequently. Yes, sir. Your videos inspired me to explore this hobby, and somebody who didn't know a thing about the aquarium now has 6 of them. Wow. Now my question is, if you know that submerged plants business is scalable like Tropica and other big players, why do you choose to do immersed plants? How do you plan on scaling your business or plans like that at all? I don't get to see YouTubers telling viewers that they'll answer their questions all. So one more. The usual issue that I get from my tank is blackbeard algae and blue-green algae. API algae fix doesn't seem to help this case. I do blackout for blue-green algae and hydroperoxide for keeping vegetable plants. Okay. Um, that is quite a question. Um, I'm I'm not going to heavily invest in a submerged or immersed plant, um, an immersed plant system, because an immersed plant system is not the desired growth state from my customers. And although some plants I sell are grown immersed because they simply or they're in their immersed form because they simply do not spend enough time submerged in the pond from when I get them from my big wholesaler, I'll still sell immersed plants, but for the most part, all my plants are grown submerged. So the chances of a customer getting a submerged grown plant is very high versus getting an immersed grown plant, because that's just how I keep my plants in general. An immersed plant system, business, whatever, is more suited for the big wholesalers that need to produce plants rather quickly, and a lot of them for a lot of different businesses, a lot of people, a lot of orders, whatever, which some might say that that's exactly what I do. But at the end of the day, an immersed plant system is so much different and requires so much more space, way more space than what I have available. So I would say that along with cost and along with space, it's practically impossible for me to ever do something like that. And like I said, I wouldn't want to, just because my customers prefer submerged grown plants. And if I'm able to offer them that, I definitely will. As far as blue-green algae and hydrogen peroxide, blue-green algae or cyanobacteria is something that, it's not even an algae. Like I said, it's a bacteria. It's something that grows because you're either not doing proper maintenance on your tank. Algae and bacteria like that in general tend to grow when there's something going on with your tank, either too much fish, too much light, too much nutrients, not enough plants. As I've said with the other questions in regards to algae, there's so many things that can cause algae to grow. So it's hard to say why algae is growing in your particular case without knowing more about your tank. John Cruz says, "Hey Jacob, 10-gallon nano tank with a pretty decent light. I've had a big issue with brown algae in my brown algae in my tank. Can I simply just brush it off? But it hasn't gotten everything. So, look, 6 nails. Do you think snail or perhaps another fish would suffice? Maybe even treating the tank?" John, I would say definitely a cleanup crew will help you out a lot. So I would say invest in some shrimp, some autosinkless catfish, algae eaters in general. Brushing it off is not really a good idea because you could just be moving it around in your tank, and it could get into other areas that you don't have access to, like in between plants and stuff, and it can start growing there. So basically, you could just be making the problem worse. So I wouldn't recommend brushing it off the surfaces of your aquarium, but I will say investing in a good cleanup crew will definitely help out a lot, as well as checking other things in your tank, like how much light you're giving your tank and nutrients and your plant load. A lot of different things affect why algae grows in a planted tank. Aquatic Crib says, "I know you're a fan of API Algae Fix. I was wondering if you ever noticed your fish were acting weird after dosing. Sometimes after I dose, I'll notice my molly will sit down at the bottom of the substrate and not move for a while, and my keyhole cichlids act stressed." Actually, yeah. Whenever I did dose API Algae Fix, my fish did act different, and I always wondered why. And when I started to notice that, I kind of stopped using it. I really can't say. I know it's supposed to starve the aquarium, the environment that it's dosed in, of oxygen, which in return helps to defeat algae. That could be an issue. It could just be that there's so much oxygen being sucked out of the system that the fish feel like they're being suffocated. Um, it's really hard to say, but I've noticed that myself. And as a result of that, I've stopped using API Algae Fix, and I'll only use it if I ultimately have to. But I will say that I've never lost a fish because of it. And it could be because I dosed too much of it, you know. That product can kill plants, it can kill fish if you dose too much of it. So that might be the issue. So just make sure you're dosing the recommended amount. Tropical Fish Craze channel says, big like. Well, thank you. Last question, and this is a big one. Hello, I've had Anubias for 2 years now. I bought some at my local fish store, online, from fellow plant keepers, etc. I know, oh wait, you bought Anubias from your local fish store and from other plant keepers. Okay, well, since I sell plants, we have nothing to talk about here because you didn't buy plants from me. I'm just kidding. I know all the basics to care for them. Low light, don't bury the rhizome, and basic fertilizers, easy. However, despite this, I still deal with random Anubias rot and death. It comes in waves from 1 to 3 months. They're all thriving and even flowering, and then there's a month of doom where I lose 1/3 of them. I notice the rhizome rots and slowly one gets healthy. Your heart breaks. I remove the rotten plant to prevent losing the entire plant. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it dies regardless. It's been a roller coaster for 2 years. Any ideas as to what's been happening and how to prevent this? I would say if your plants are growing great for a period of time and they're not growing great for another period of time, you're changing something. You're either not dosing enough nutrients or something like that. Anubias plants are very easy to grow. I have several Anubias plants in this tank. I would say that it's definitely something that's changing in the tank. So whatever you're changing, stop because it's messing with your plants. Plants don't just die randomly. They don't just disappear randomly. Plants die and start to melt as a result of something that's changing in their environment. So whatever you're changing, you know, try to think about what you're doing and maintenance schedule, you know, things like that. You know, stop because it's killing your plants. Well, this has been a very long video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I told you I was going to answer every single question. My phone is down to less than 10% battery, so I'm surprised I was able to achieve this video. We got lucky. So before my phone dies, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Stay tuned for more videos here on Jacob's Aquarium. And if you're in the market for aquarium plants, as always, visit jacobsaquarium.com, where you'll find over 100, or actually almost 100 different species of aquatic plants for the most affordable price on the internet. It's my website. I manage it. I ship all the plants. I take care of the plants. Everything is done by me, so you can, you know, rest assured, know that what you're getting is a quality product. And also, don't forget to check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All my social media links will be in the description below. Thanks again for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. I love you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Have fun with your tanks.